Magenta Horizon is a very interesting and unique action game that finally left early access in 2024. And what we have here is an action game that plays nothing quite like the many games that we've seen. But it's that uniqueness that may be this game's undoing when it comes to guiding the player to learn the orchestra of death that this game is about. Our story involves Greta, an exiled reaper in the afterlife, who awakens after about 200 years of slumber by an archaeologist. She then decides to explore to figure out what her purpose is and why she was banished and locked away. And to solve that, she is going to have to rip, tear, jump, dash, and a whole lot of other combat maneuvers through a variety of very beautiful and weird looking environments. Magenta Horizon is an action game through and through, but as I said in the stinger, it does not play like a lot of the other ones that we've seen. And that is both to this game's benefit and to its negative that we'll come back to in a few minutes. Combat is high speed and about constant movement. In this respect, the game plays similar to that of a spectacle action game like your Bayonettas, Devil May Cry's, and so on, as you have access to launcher attacks, follow the enemy in the air, continue combos, slam them down, etc, etc. Now, the first thing that is unique about this game that's going to take some getting used to is how hit stun works. In most action games, your kind of light or normal attacks can at least give you some element of hit stun, maybe against like lighter enemies, and of course your heavy attack guarantees hit stun. In this game, quick attacks, which is this game's version of lights, do not do any hit stun whatsoever. Instead, it's all about your heavy attacks that are designed to be kind of your initiator into combat to then go heavy on the enemy using your quick attack moves. The combo system is very similar to that of Bayonetta, that you'll mix the different inputs of quick and heavy to do certain chain actions and certain attacks. This can also be used in the air as well for its own set of moves. Another aspect of this game that is very unique is how healing works, as the game features a kind of push-forward combat system, where as you hit enemies, you'll build up kind of your healing meter. It's this like little bar below your health gauge at the top. Every time it fills up, you'll gain kind of one kind of healing grenade. When you throw it on an enemy, you prime them as they kind of turn green, that any further damage will grant you healing. This is the only way to get health back outside the game's checkpoints. And to make things even more complicated, checkpointing in Magenta Horizon is based on a kind of one-off system, that you can activate a checkpoint only once per level. And the level design in this game, outside of some very specific levels, is meant to be more open-ended, that you'll have multiple routes to explore, keys and special things to find, and of course get into arena fights. If you use checkpoints too early, you may not be able to survive or get good enough to get past like waves of enemies to the next checkpoint. You wait too long, and all the progress that you had is gone if you end up dying. And the game features a very much like in the Ninja Gaiden series, where the different difficulties will radically change the level flow of arena fights and just how masochistic you want this game to be. And this game can get quite difficult. You see, as you go forward in it, the enemies in this one are very happy to go at you all at once. They do not take turns to attack you. Most arena encounters, especially on the higher difficulties, will have you facing against a combination of light and kind of like the larger or more elite enemies. There are boss fights as well to deal with, and the game also features upgrades in the form of finding new kind of necklace pieces, which are like this game's passives, and new kind of spells slash attacks. You can equip up to 4 different spells in your kind of repertoire, and each one has its own separate meter for use. So this allows you to really play around with using these abilities in combat far more than we see from other action games. And when you get good at Magenta Horizon, it can turn into a very crazy and intense experience of you bouncing, slashing, jumping, and so on. The issue that this game has is that the onboarding, I feel, is just not up to task to get someone into the unique mindset of playing this game. And there's several big points about this. As I said a few minutes ago, you have different moves, and your moves again are attached to different combos. Certain attacks are explicitly designed to counter certain enemies or certain enemy behaviors, but the game does not tell you that at all. The only case I ran into is when it taught you that using your down X attack, which also gives you kind of like a bonus jump in the air, that you can also use this to hit back homing projectiles at enemies. But each enemy type in this game has a very specific way of fighting them, and if you figure that out, they go down relatively fast. But the game doesn't give you any hints or means of understanding that. So imagine, for instance, playing a game like Doom Eternal, where you have all the different rules and interactions for weapons and the different demon types, but the game gives you no enemy tutorial. And just imagine how frustrating it would be to play the game, especially when you're trying to learn it and like the Ragnatrons just destroys you with its heavy weapons. And imagine also trying to fight something like the Marauder without any guidance whatsoever as a new player. And this is what it feels like to play this game for the first time. That it is immensely frustrating to be told kind of the basic tools, but not really given an explanation of how to apply them and how to learn this game's combat. For instance, you do not have any parries or blocks in this game. This is all dodge and jump based. You have it kind of like a generic dodge, and you have this kind of like grab move that when you do it, you kind of pull yourself through the enemy. And while you're in that pull animation, you have iframes. But it's very hard to kind of learn what this game is expecting of you simply by going through the tutorials alone. And the game also spreads out very important information way too long for a title like this. The down heavy attack gives you this kind of slide that grants hit stun and is an amazing initiator for combat. The game waited until I think like 3 or 4 levels in to actually tell you that, where it would have been very useful, oh I don't know, when it throws its first like 5 to 7 light enemies all rushing you from multiple angles fight and trying to kill you. The overall difficulty of this game is definitely on the higher side. If you are like a veteran of action games like myself, I would recommend going maybe 1 or even 2 levels below what you commonly play to learn this game. Because a lot of the learning, at least in the current version or 1.0, is going to be learning by doing. Or should I say learning by dying over and over again. And it creates a lot of pain points when you start playing this one, because trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing to these enemies feels like trial and error in a lot of cases. So here's another example. In the kind of I guess like third act of the game, you're dealing with these kinds of helicopter flying enemies, and flying enemies in action games are always annoying no matter what you do. If you try to attack them from above, you'll take damage from the propeller blades. So the best strat is to use your up heavy attack to kind of smack them out of the air and then just go in on them while they're on the ground. That's great, except the game doesn't tell you that that is an option at all. And while some of you will enjoy the fact that the game kind of like lets you off the leash to figure things out, without giving the player like basic knowledge of how these moves interact, what is the kind of general flow you want to be achieving for combat, it leads to things being far more frustrating than they need to be. And this is certainly evident by the high churn according to the achievement rates of this game. So Magenta Horizon, this is a tricky one to talk about. If you do not like hard action games or action games in general, this is not going to be the title for you. And even with my misgivings, I would highly recommend you check this game out, or at least check out the demo, because this is not going to work for a lot of people, I can guarantee that. But if it works for you, this could easily be one of your favorite action games of all time. And there is definitely like a very interesting aspect of combining multiple combat systems and kind of the use of push forward combat in a 2D action game. And I think there is certainly potential here to iterate on this design and especially improve the onboarding to make it easier for someone to parse who isn't going to want to rush through and wait for the tutorial messages to kind of guide them into things. Magenta Horizon was played with a press key provided by the publisher. If you want to take your game for a future stream and video, please reach out. If you did happen to play this one, let me know what you thought about it down below, because again, this is going to be a game that you're either going to really love or really hate, and I don't see anything else in between. Thanks for watching, and I will see everyone in the next video. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and if you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.